So the heart of the gospel is God's heart and his motive of why he gave his son's life for you. Let's go to the most famous verse in the Bible, John chapter 3, verse 16. I was talking with Charles Picard the other day about, I did this on a Christmas Eve message years ago, but this is a little different. It doesn't hurt us to hear it again. Verse 16, a simple verse. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. We're going to go through this one word at a time. So we're going to meditate on this verse together. So we're going to start with for is a transition word. For God. See, we read these too quickly. And when we read them too quickly, they become facts to us. Theology. I know, okay, God so loved the world, they gave his only begotten Son. Whoever believes in him should not perish, blah, 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 blah. All right, well, let's go through this slowly. For God. Because this is the one that he says loves us this way. So let's talk a little bit about who this God is. And this, when you begin to grasp who this God is, you begin to see how remarkable this love is, then you see who we are. So when you see who this God is, and we see who we are, you begin to see how remarkable this love is. And we could spend weeks studying who this God is. And so it's requiring some measure of discipline on my part to focus this in. But just to give you a taste. This is the one who's given us this love. First of all, he is the creator of all things. One of the parts of my time of devotion every morning, almost every morning, is when I begin to address God, my Father, I begin to talk to him and says, I thank you because I acknowledge that this life that's in me, that's so precious to me, that I'm trying to hold on so desperately, you created. I didn't create this life. I can't create life. Yes, we have 4 children, and we did what, I won't go into details about that, but the life came from God. I can't produce life. And our scientists may think they are, but where are they getting it from? They're just messing around with raw materials, but the life itself can only come from life himself. So he's the creator of all things. Hebrews 11, verse 3. By faith, and this is why science can't understand this, because it's only by faith you can understand this. By faith we understand that the worlds, that's the entire natural universe, that the worlds were framed by the Word of God. It doesn't have it in there, but it's in 24 hours. So that the things which are seen, the things where our 5 senses can detect, were not made of things that are visible. So this Creator created this whole realm of existence by his words. He didn't send the angels to Home Depot and to Lowe's with a list of supplies they need. He made what we would call something out of what we would call nothing. Now, it wasn't out of nothing, but for what you can see, it was out of nothing. This is the God who's shown this love towards us. So if he can create all things, he can do anything. Nobody makes God do anything God doesn't want to do. So stop trying to manipulate him. Let's go back to John 3:16. We're going to keep going back and forth. So what else about this God? He's the creator of all things. By the way, Hebrews 1 verse 3, which I won't put up there, says he's upholding all things by the word of his power. This universe is held together, and the science will tell us how expanding at a phenomenal rate. That's all the result of God saying, let there be. They can trace everything back to that Big Bang. I can tell you what the Big Bang was. Let there be. That's the power of his words. Energy came from his words, let there be. Imagine being a being that has unlimited power. All powerful. And the one that's all powerful, this gets a little scary, is all knowing. Now think of what that means. He never learns anything. He never gets up someday, which I don't think he gets up anyway, but I mean, he never, wow, that was a good idea. That means he's not amazed at the great insights you have. Woo! I never thought of that before. God doesn't have opinions, because an opinion is an educated guess, if it's a good opinion. Which means to have an opinion you don't know. When you know everything that's not an opinion, you're right. I'll just simplify every argument you ever have with God. He's right. He's always right. So get over it. The sooner we adjust to Him being right, then we'll be right. Just trying to expand your mind a little bit. He's all-knowing. He understands. He understands everything all at once. My mind doesn't do that at all. I go from one thought to another thought to another thought, and hopefully they fit together. But He understands everything all at once. He's omnipresent. That means He's everywhere all at once. Satan's not everywhere all at once. He can only be in one place at one time. God's not limited by time. We'll talk about that in a minute. He's everywhere. He's unlimited. That's how, see, these are things our mind has trouble grasping, because everything our mind knows has limits. There's limited power that we have. We have limited knowledge. We have but God's not one of us. C.S. Lewis, one of the great apologetics, he wrote an example in one of his efforts to understand the limitlessness of God. He said, imagine you had a piece of paper, and this is hard to do, but let's try, that goes out infinitely in every direction. Just, there's no limit to it. And then you discover that there is on that unlimited piece of paper a pencil line of 1 inch. That represents time out of eternity. And you put the pencil on the beginning of the line, that's the beginning of time, and you draw that 1 inch out of all this infinity to the end of the inch, and that's the end of time. God's perspective is He sees everything all at once. And that's so hard, because we live in time. But God doesn't live in time. He lives outside of time. He can work in time, but He's working in time from being out of time, which means when you come to Christ, He's not looking at Jesus dying for you 2,000 years ago. He sees Jesus on that cross now. What would be now for us? I'm getting the cobwebs out of your brain. Father God sees everything all at once, which means when you received Christ, He saw everything you ever did or ever will do all at once. So you didn't fool Him. So when you blew it yesterday, you didn't take Him by surprise. Oh, if I'd only known that, I never would have received them. No, He knows it all. He's complete in Himself. He doesn't need anybody. He didn't save you and call you because He's in desperate need for you. He saved you and called you because He wanted you. He's complete in Himself. He doesn't need anybody. He doesn't need anything. Everything comes from Him. Why would He need anything? By the way, this is all in the notes. You can download it. He's complete in Himself. He is self-existent. When Moses said to, this is in Exodus 3, when Moses said to him, and he said, I want you to go back and tell the people that I'm setting you free. Moses says to God, he said, well the elders are going to be, who sent you? And this was the answer. Do you have it to put up there? And God said to Moses, here, I am. I am who I am. That's what you shall say to the children of Israel. I am has sent you. I am what? Well, whatever the what is limits who he is. He just am. He is self-existent. He owes his existence to nobody. Every existence that exists comes from him. He's the source of all existence. He is self-existent. This is the God who loves you. I got to move on. And this is where I wanted to get to. He is, and absolutes are hard for us to grasp, he is absolutely holy. He is absolute holiness. The Bible sometimes talks to this in terms of a fire, and it's not a fire like a blowtorch, it's a fire like fiery truth. He is pure. He is holy. And here's the problem. Our minds cannot grasp holiness. Holiness is perfect purity. Everything we know has some balance of it. We can't understand absolute love. I'll give you a good example of it. There is a thing called absolute cold. And it's some 600 and some degrees below zero. And that is a place where there is no heat at all present. So when you walk out Monday morning and it's 25 degrees outside and you feel cold, there's still heat out there. Science will tell us. In fact, they have this thing called a heat pump, which takes the heat out of whatever the air is out there. So temperature to us is relative. So in this room right now, some of you are hot, some of you are cold, and the physical temperature is exactly the same because you're comparing it to how your body feels. But 600 and some degrees below zero is absolute cold. There's no heat in it. And you and I can't begin to imagine that. Well, now transfer that concept over to holiness. Because the most purest thing you know still has impurities. The most purest person you know still has some motives that are not entirely pure. But God is absolutely pure. So the only way the Bible helps us to do this is by contact with some people that have experienced that. So go back to John 3:16. What is it he gave? What did he give? Some of his time? What did he give? He so loved us that he gave something. And what was it he gave because he so loved us? His only begotten Son. So I spent time looking and meditating on what's only begotten mean. Well, the word actually means unique, only one. And I began, well, wait a minute, I'm a son of God, but but we're adopted. He's born out of God. And this is so important. Our sonship, and that includes you ladies too, our sonship is only because we're in the only begotten Son. So we could not become a son of God unless he'd given the only begotten Son. Now in Romans, Paul talks about the firstborn among many brethren. But we're brethren, but he came out of the Father. Let's go to John chapter 1. Let me make sure I'm not getting too far ahead of myself here. It speaks of his unique sonship, which came directly from the Father before anything else existed. Our sonship only comes through this Son. And it speaks of the special, close, and intimate relationship. So when John 3:16 talks about God gave his only begotten Son, it's talking about God gave to us the most precious thing he had. And the only terms we can grasp that with, again, we have to use human terms for things that are so far beyond human experiences, is a son. Is a son. His only begotten Son. It's not the only Son, but he's the only one begotten of him. The most precious thing to God. Now we're talking about what manner of love the Father's bestowed upon us. For God so loved the world. We talked about that a few weeks ago. He didn't so love the church. He didn't so love the good doobies who would come and follow him. He loved the most reprobate person that'll split hell wide open. He gave his son for them also. What manner of love is this? It's foreign to my thinking. It's foreign to the ways that we've been trained in. But it is the character and nature of this God who gave. This is a window into the kind of love we're talking about. What he gave, that he gave and what he gave is the window. This is what this verse is all about. This is a window into God's heart. This is a window into God's nature. We can't see in there, but we can extrapolate from what he did, what his heart is. Whoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. Let's go to Philippians chapter 3. Let's see what he did. We've talked about this before. So we're with this Christmas time. So we're talking today about the gift, the first half of the gift, which is what God gave this gift. Next week we'll talk about, assuming I finish all of this, we'll talk about what he did with that gift. That gift came to die for you and me. Just giving the gift wasn't enough. The gift was given with a purpose. Let's go down to, keep moving, verse 6, verse 7. Oh, you know what? This should be chapter 2. I did it again. Philippians 2, verse 5. I'm sorry. Have this mind in you, which also was in Christ Jesus, who thought it was being in the form of God, did not consider it robbery to be equal with God. Who being in the form of God did not consider it robbery to be equal with God. We talked about that several weeks ago. But he made himself of no reputation. He emptied himself of all of his divine attributes. He emptied himself of his power, of his knowledge. Jesus did not do his miracles because he was the second person of the Godhead. He gave that all up. He gave up his glory. I don't have time to go through all the verses to show it to you, but when he comes to the end of his earthly ministry, he asks God to restore to him what he gave up. Made himself of no reputation. It was a decision he made. Now we're talking about the love of Christ for us, the second person of the Godhead. He made himself of no, he emptied himself, but he doesn't empty himself, to take the form of a bondservant. He didn't come as the second person of the Godhead to be honored and worshiped as the creator of the universe. But he humbled himself. Let's go over now to 1 John, or to Gospel John, chapter 1. I'm having to skip some things because of time. John chapter 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So we're looking now at heaven before he came to the earth, at who this is that the Father sent, who this only begotten Son is. In the beginning was the Word. That's the Greek word logos, which means the full expression of something. So in the beginning, you had God the Father, the Creator, but you also had in him, and don't try to explain the Trinity or understand it, just do the best you can. Part of him was an expression of himself. The word there, logos, for word, means the full expression of someone. It says nature. Well, we use that term. They're a chip off the old block. Sometimes people around will say, trying to figure out who my son Chris looks like. Does he look like mom or me? I hope he looks more like her than me. But, we got to figure out who that child looks like. What do they resemble? You just find out that, you find in your own life. I found myself saying things my mother used to say that I swore I'd never say. I'll never say that. And the same words come out of my attitudes come out. Why? Because we're born out of them. Our parents, our physical bodies, born out of them. So there's a natural resemblance. Well, he was born out of God the Father, the Creator, and he is the full expression. In fact, Hebrews 1 verse 3 says he's the exact representation of his nature. He is the outshining of his glory. And he laid that all aside to become a bondservant. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Keep going, because we got just a few more minutes. He was in the beginning with God when everything was created. All things were made through him. This is the Christ. And without him, nothing was made that was made. This is the one who left all that to come here out of love for you. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. It's what lit us up. It gave us life. All life came from the Father through him. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it. That means overcome it. Go to verse 9. This was the true light which gives light to every man coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, but the world didn't know him. You imagine that? Those men that beat him, the men that nailed him to a cross. He made them. He made the cross. Now, he didn't fashion it, but the wood, the trees came from him. The nails came from him. And the world did not know him. He came unto his own, that's Israel, and they did not receive him. But as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become children of God, to those who believe in his name. Keep going. Who were born not of blood, nor the will of flesh, nor the will of man, but of God. This is what I want to get to. And the Word, the one we're just talking about, the one we've been talking about, became flesh. He didn't just become flesh. He didn't just come and appear on mountains in all his fleshly glory. He was conceived in a teenager's womb. She had to carry him for 9 months, just the way your mother had to carry you. He came into this world through the same process that every other human being has come into this world. He didn't skip anything. Because of who he is, he didn't take any advantages. And where was he born? He came forth through the birth canal just like you did, and he was born in a stable. And the first place he was laid outside of his mother's womb was a feeding trough. God, who created the universe, the second person of the Godhead, the Word, became flesh. Behold, what manner of love is this, that we should be called children of God. And he did all of that, not to prove anything about himself, but he did that, and this is just the beginning of what he did. This is just his entrance into it. And he did this so that he could go through the process we'll talk about next week, that he could die, that he could be humiliated, that he could be raised from the dead, to end up back where he started. Why would he do that? Because he's not just back where he started, because now he's made it possible for you and me to also be adopted into this family and as a child of God. That's the manner of love that God has bestowed upon us. And it's foreign to this world's thinking. But it's the love that's been shed abroad in our heart for one another and for this lost and dying world. And we're not walking in it anywhere near the way we're called to, because we really haven't seen and experienced that love for us. So as we walk through the rest of this Christmas season, and you finish with your plans for packages and giving and festivities and all the stuff that you may be going through, or maybe you're going through a difficult time. This is a difficult time for you where there are painful memories and because there's lost ones, or maybe Christmas wasn't a joyful time for you. Maybe the memories of Christmases past is not good, or maybe the anticipation of this Christmas, whatever it is. Let's focus our eyes. Let's focus our eyes on the one who made this all possible. The one who gave to us out of this manner of love. Let's meditate as we did this morning. That's all we did this morning, is meditate on a few verses. meditate on John 3:16. Go through, and you take the notes, go through it. God, this holy God, loved me enough that he gave his holy son's life in my place, that I might be a child of the living God and live with him forever. What kind of love is this, Father? What kind of love is this? Help me to grasp this love and experience this kind of love. This is what Christmas is all about. It's being grateful for and receiving the love that God has for us. And out of that, as Anita was sharing earlier so eloquently, you can't help but give it.